Today, I will be continuing my reading from my 2016 novel. I don't know why I'm talking like that. So I'm going to continue with chapter 19 today. My 2016 book, Break the Bastion. It's been a little while since I've read, so it'll take me a minute to kind of get back up to speed. But so I will start on page 138, chapter 19. Over the next several weeks, Morgan snuck out of school nearly every day before last period to meet Callista. They usually met on the rooftop where Morgan first saw her. She liked it up there in the afternoon sun, and Morgan eventually got over his fear of heights. They rode the cable car up and down New Mountain and took walks together around the rich neighborhoods. When the sun went down, they sat in the park, kissing and holding hands. They would sometimes just lay there quietly with the moonlight overhead and the bastion at their feet. In those moments, Morgan felt his body crying out, a writhing discomfort like an itch on his brain. Every time he let his hands free to explore, he found himself softly rebuked. As the weeks went on, it was all Morgan thought about. When he went to sleep, he imagined the moment he would see her the following day. One evening, just as the sun was going down, he and Callista were walking in one of the posh neighborhoods near her house. At first, they didn't notice anything peculiar on the street. They were both too involved with each other to detect anything amiss. However, after a while, it became clear to them both that something was wrong on that particular street. Although the lawns were mowed and the mail wasn't overflowing in the boxes, it appeared that almost all the homes had been abandoned. That evening, automatic lights switched on, illuminating empty living rooms and dining rooms. There were no cars in the driveways or on the street. No sounds from children, no adult voices could be heard for what seemed like miles. "I knew those people," said Callista, pointing to one of the many empty estates, a sprawling brick and colonial house. "My dad introduced me once. The father and mother are surgeons." "Where do you think they went?" "Beats me," she said. "I saw them leave a few days ago, meeting with my dad. Like a lot of others, they just picked up and left. Not a word about it." They continued down the street until they noticed a home that stood out. Not only was it the largest on the block, there were people, a middle-aged man and a woman, just sitting on their porch waiting, watching. Piled on their lawn, they had a collection of colorful toys and children's clothing. It appeared that they had just thrown away every item related to children. They looked surprised to see Morgan and Callista. Callista held up her hand to wave, and the couple just stood there. After a moment, they turned and went inside. It was as though they were ghosts, cold spirits left behind. Their home was still fully furnished, and their 2 Dachshund dogs were in the yard. They seemed to be the only residents left in the neighborhood. "Guess they didn't get the invite," said Morgan. "What do you suppose is different about them?" "Something about the looks on their faces," said Callista. "I want to know why they threw out all those toys and clothes. What happened to their kids?" "I've heard a lot of running away with the rumors of the draft. I've heard they'll take you as young as 14. Just as the remnants of sun faded, Morgan spotted something in the trees near one of the houses. He and Callista heard a scratching sound, then familiar laughter. After a while, they realized the scratching and laughing was coming from Nox Jabarosa. He was covered in mud and crusted blood. Only the whites of his eyes shone. Nox was dragging his bloody hand along the stucco of one of the mansions, spelling out something in red. Scrawling in his own blood, Nox kept laughing to himself. When he saw Morgan and Callista, he got excited and shouted, "Woohoo, it's my friends! Friends of Strix are always friends of mine. If only Lucas Mucus were here too." Nox approached, but kept a few feet away from them. "Did you see what I'm making?" he asked them, pointing to his bloody handprints. Come and see, don't worry, you're my friends, we're together, we part of the same thing, come and see." Callista recognizes Nox's drawing right away. It looked like the map from her father's office, and the same one from the Bastion dome. The layout of the city was there, as well as the 3 bright spots. All around the drawing, Knox had rubbed the word Lacrone in blood. Callista asked him, "Knox, what does Lacrone mean?" "It's a man, isn't it?" "He's a man sometimes," said Knox. Morgan asked, "What the hell is he the rest of the time?" Knox didn't answer. Instead, he just stared at them. Callista asked, "Knox, you know that picture you're drawing, the map? Where did you see that?" "I'm seeing it right now," Knox said. "I see it all the time. It's in my head." "What is it?" "The plan," said Knox. "It's the plan." "Whose plan is it?" Knox smiled, saying, "Mr. Lacrone's plan. It's Master's plan. It's a master plan. It's my favorite plan." Morgan asked him, "Where is that Lacrone man? Where can we find him?" Knox turned and pointed to the top of the Bastion. "You can only see Mr. Lacrone sometimes," he said. "Who is he?" Callista asked. Knox's face went blank. The whites of his eyes beamed out from beyond the mud covering his face. Then he whispered, "He's no one. That's how he does what he does. He isn't really here." "Well, that clears that up then," said Morgan, smirking to Callista. "I don't know how I was ever confused." Callista asked Knox, "I know something happened to you. Can you talk about it? Can you tell us what Strix did to you?" Knox's smile flowered across his face. He whispered, "Strix helped me. They made me see. Now I have them in my head too. We're connected. Me, you, Morgan, and Lucas Mucus. We're connected now. We're part of the same thing. Strix says you'll be able to see their minds soon, like me. He says it happened too fast for me. Strix says my brain couldn't handle it. He's talking to me right now." Morgan and Callista looked at the Mechanica owls they had with them. Both sets of eyes were pulsing red, pointed at Knox, like they were hooked into the boy's soul. All of a sudden, Knox froze, and his eyes scanned the Bastion. For a moment, he stopped breathing. Then a flash in the sky sent a lightning bolt colliding with one of the electrical rods on top. The crack sent Knox running like a frightened alley cat. The following morning, Lucas woke up with his mother standing over his bed. Her mouth was bent into a smile, but her eyes were wide with what seemed like anger. In her hand, she held a ceramic cup full of something steamy that smelled like mildew. "Good morning, baby," she said. "I was watching you sleep." Holding out the cup to him, she said, "You haven't looked so good lately. I thought this would help." Lucas sniffed the air, taking in the pungent, earthy smell of her concoction. "What is it?" he asked. "It's a mixture of roots," she said. "It gets rid of toxins. Go ahead, be a good boy and drink it." Lucas held out his hand, then hesitated. "What's wrong with you?" she asked. "Go ahead and drink it. It'll make you feel better." "I don't think I want it." She laughed, but her face formed a scowl. "You don't want to feel better?" "No, I do. I just..." "You're all I have in this world," she said. "The only man in my life. I don't want you to get sick and die. If you won't get healthy for yourself, at least, please do it for me." Lucas looked over to Strix on his nightstand. Even though he appeared to be in computer hibernation, the owl was somehow telling him not to drink. "What's wrong?" his mother asked him. "It's getting cold. It's less effective when it's cold." Lucas took the cup and swallowed the bitter liquid. Immediately, a hot, nauseous feeling started to fill his abdomen. The steam coming from the liquid stung his eyes. He nearly choked on the last drops of the tea. "See," his mother said. "All better." She went on saying, "I noticed you haven't been looking so well lately. I've been worried. You don't look right to me." Lucas got out of bed, and his mother helped him get dressed. Just the effort lifting his arms to slide his shirt on seemed like too much. His forehead broke out into a hot sweat just before she slid his shoes on for him. Just before she left the room, his mother told him, "Be careful with that fog today. Visibility is bad. Make sure you wait for the signal at the crosswalk. He put Strix in his backpack and headed for school. Fog had taken over the streets outside. The sea smoke, as some people called it, poured over the top of the Bastion like an overflowing bathtub. The cloud slowly rolled thousands of feet down until it filled the entire basin underneath. Lucas could only see a few feet ahead of him and had to use the sidewalks and pavement to navigate. "We're sorry," said Strix from his backpack. "What do you mean? Sorry for what?" "Sorry we couldn't help you this morning." "What do you mean?" "I'm fine," said Lucas. The moment the words came out of his mouth, Lucas stopped in the middle of a stride. He could feel his heart thumping hard in his chest. Beads of sweat tickled down his back. It was hard to stand up. Lucas fell to one knee and tried to catch his breath. No matter how much air he could slurp up, he still felt like he was suffocating. "What's wrong with me?" he asked Strix. "I'm having trouble breathing." "You know what's wrong," said Strix. "You drank your mother's tea." "That's supposed to help me." "Is it?" Lucas's face started to turn red. He told Strix, "She's my mom. She's trying to help me. Maybe something else is wrong. Maybe she made the wrong tea or made the tea wrong. Or perhaps," said Strix, "she made it precisely right." "Stop it," Lucas said. "Just stop." While Lucas fought to stand up, the air became opaque with salty fog. It was disorienting, and it made him feel like the whole world consisted of only him and the voice of Strix. "You're going to stand up," said the owl. "After you stand up, you're going to walk." "I can't see anything. I don't know the way." "We know the way, Lucas," said Strix. "We'll guide you." Strix's eyes beamed out two bright red spotlights. The odd crimson color somehow split the fog in two, creating two crystal clear spots in the haze. It was as though the fog had cleared where the light touched. "I know you feel alone," Strix went on. "That feeling will make you stronger." "I'm not alone," Lucas argued. "I have my mom." "Lucas, that's worse than being alone. It's time you let yourself see the truth. It's plainly obvious. Plainly obvious. Your mother is poisoning you." "No, she's not!" Lucas yelled before a cough took his voice over. "She's trying to make me feel better. She's trying to take care of me." "She won't stop until you're dead," said Strix. "It happened the same way with your father." "Stop it," Lucas shouted, coughing so hard he nearly vomited. "That's not how my father died. Why are you doing this to me? I thought you were here to help me." "We are, Lucas." "Then why are you telling me I'm alone and the only person I have on Earth is trying to kill me?" "We're sorry," said Strix. "We wish things were different. However, we need you to go on. It's very important. You can't give up, Lucas." When Morgan arrived at school that foggy morning, a crowd was gathering in front of the entrance. The police were already there, and their red and white lights danced like ghosts in the fog. It wasn't until Morgan got close that he saw what was creating the commotion. One of Knox's friends was laying in front of the school dead. The boy's body appeared to be ransacked. Blood, tissues, and organs scattered everywhere. Trails of his blood led away from the body to the walls of the school, where someone had painted even more graffiti. This time, the painted blood made up both owl faces, as well as something perhaps more terrifying. Giant waves. Sketch and Knox's friend's blood had been drawn everywhere. The graffiti showed the wave collapsing over the Bastion and covering the city. School officials were trying to keep the students away. The police were looking for Knox. Asking everyone at school where they could find the troubled boy. The school administrators even sent everyone home to make room for the investigation. When Morgan got home, his father was half asleep on the couch. He had the war on television, the volume turned to the maximum. His eyelids drooped to slits he had taken a heavy dose of his anxiety medication. Empty cans of beer covered the coffee table. "Pull up a chair," he told Morgan, somehow looking simultaneously friendly and menacing. "I don't get to spend much time with my son." He asked Morgan to watch the war with him. Apparently, he, along with everyone he worked with, had been given the day off work with pay. "It's damn strange," he said to Morgan. "In 20 years, I've never gotten the day off with pay. I tell you, something weird is going on at that place. Been hearing all kinds of stories. One guy I know said his 2 boys didn't come home from school, just disappeared without a word. I gotta tell you, I was a bit jealous." On TV, a stack of missiles took flight, each waiting for its turn to lift off. Moody music played underneath while the reporters described the day's casualties. Morgan and his father sat for a while, taking in the TV's pageantry. After a while, something in his father's expression changed, and Morgan was hit in the pit of his stomach. Perhaps the anxiety pills were wearing off, or the war was getting to him, as it sometimes did. Either way, he started looking at Morgan the same way he did to some of the immigrants in the neighborhood, like his son was the last person he wanted to see. "You know," Killian said, scowling, "I've spoken to one of the hospices down the street about getting your brother in." "You didn't," said Morgan, standing up from his chair. "Well, why would you do something like that?" "I don't know," he said with a trace of a smile. "Or maybe I do." "We're supposed to manage his condition," said Morgan. "We're not throwing him out of his home." His father stood up and looked at him like a boxing opponent. "His home?" he asked. "I thought this was my home. After all, I'm the one busting my hump to pay the rent. I don't see you or your brother contributing anything. I'll get a job. I'll make money." "No, you won't. You're a damn kid. You're useless, and you don't know squat. No job is going to pay you anything." "I'll get money somehow," said Morgan. "I'll get a job at the Bastion like you if I have to." His father laughed, telling him, "You wouldn't last an hour at that place. Kids don't know how to work anymore. You're all lazy and useless." "Brian's not going anywhere," growled Morgan, who was wearing the most serious expression his father had ever seen on him. "I'm not going to let it happen. If I were you, I wouldn't even try." His father took a step toward him. However, now the man was not laughing. His face took on a shade of red, and eyebrows angled to his nose. "Be careful," he told Morgan. "The man you're raising your voice to is not above knocking you across the room. In fact, I bet it'll do you some good. Brian is staying. I'm going to take care of him, and there isn't a damn thing you're going to do about it." Morgan felt the sting of a slap across his face. His father had wound up and cracked him so hard that his cheek felt numb. For a few moments, they just stood there. It was as though some grand announcement had been made, and now the entire world was different. "That should smarten you up," said his father softly. Morgan stood there, holding back angry tears with his hand on his sore cheek. He wanted to say something, to bellow out the worst barrage of insults ever, but nothing came out, except for whimpers. "Don't ever shout at someone unless you're ready to take a punch," said his father. He looked at Morgan's face, which was full of rage, and smirked at him. Then he sat back down on the couch like nothing happened. "Can you get me another beer?" he asked his son. Morgan appeared almost like a zombie when he went to the fridge to get him a bottle. The boy's eyes were so wide, he looked like a soldier in the middle of a firefight. With a kind of shell shock in his face, Morgan brought it over and handed him the beer. He looked his father in the eyes, but somehow the stare went right through him. "Don't be such a baby," his father told him. "It'll make me want to slap you again." Morgan didn't even look at him before he left and went upstairs. In order not to wake Brian, he grabbed Strix and went into the bathroom. "Can I talk to you?" he asked the owl as he lowered himself to the bathroom floor. "I don't know what to do." "The answer," said Strix, "your path, will become clear soon." "How soon?" Morgan cried. "I don't know how much longer. Please tell me what to do. I'll do anything. Please, Strix." The owl turned his face rounder and more pleasant. "We're going to take care of you," said Strix. "When the time is right, we'll make sure you're safe, Morgan. We promise." "What about Brian?" "We promise, Morgan." Late that night, Morgan was lying awake. He was restless, and the slap from his father was still fresh on his cheek. "She's awake too," said Strix from the nightstand. Morgan immediately sat up in bed. "You should go see her," Strix went on. "She misses you." "She does?" "Go to her. Your father will be unconscious for some time. Go to her, Morgan." It didn't take another word before Morgan got out of bed to put on his pants and shoes. He ran his fingers through his hair in front of the small mirror across the room. Then he checked his breath against the palm of his hand before he slipped out the door. When he arrived at Callista's house, the two windows were aglow, the one in her bedroom and the one in her father's office. Apparently, he hadn't been out of the room much. He had even been falling asleep at his desk for the past several days. Carrying her Strix under her arm, she slid out of the back door of the house. The moment she got a good look at him, she whispered, "What happened? You look upset." Morgan explained that he had been in a rather serious argument with his father. When she asked him what the fight was about, he started to lose control. "It's about my brother," he said. "He's sick, and my dad doesn't want to take care of him." Callista struggled to understand, saying, "I can't imagine. That's so horrible." "It gets worse," Morgan went on. "My dad has always suspected Brian wasn't his kid, but now he knows for sure." He hesitated before admitting, "I know he's sick. I know how sick he is. But that's not what worries me. I'm worried about my dad. I'm worried he'll what?" Morgan couldn't answer. His stomach was pushing into his throat. He felt his heart race and tears nucleate in the corners of his eyes. After a moment, he stood up and turned away from her. "I think he's going to kill him," Morgan said. "I know how crazy that sounds, but I think about it all the time. I worry about it all the time." At this point, he was crying. Callista wrapped her arms around him. The sweet smell of her hair, like some undiscovered new orchid, immediately calmed his shaking. She held him, putting her lips softly on his neck and sending her warm breath tickling his ear. The following evening, Lucas was by himself in his room, reading a book that Strix had recommended to him. The college textbook was about the basics of medical pharmacology. It was definitely above his reading level, but Strix provided recommendations and guidance as he read. Suddenly, Strix became dark and rigid as a mailbox. Lucas's mother was standing in the doorway. "Pretty advanced reading," she told him without smiling. "Where did you get that book?" "In the library," he said. "Was just curious." "Curious about what?" "I want to understand what's making me sick." "What's making you sick is your stubbornness. If you would listen more carefully to your mother, then your illness wouldn't be so advanced." She came over and slipped the book out of his hands. "It's late," she said. "You need your sleep." As she always did, she set out about a dozen of her homemade pills on the table by the bed. For a moment, Lucas just stared at the pills, which smelled like licorice crossed with sweaty gym socks. Eventually, he dropped one into his mouth with 2 fingers while he held his nose. "Very good," she told him. "Now the rest." "Mom, what do these do?" "I told you. They invigorate the immune system and rid your body of toxins." "What toxins?" "Swallow them now." Lucas downed the rest of the pills, then followed with a cup of bitter tea she had made from her herb garden. The mix brought immediate nausea, and a warm flush started in his face. "I'm pretty tired, Mom. Is it okay if I go to sleep now?" "Of course, baby," she said, wiping the beads of sweat forming on his forehead. "You're going to need your sleep if you're going to be as strong as you need to be." Then she walked out, leaving his bedroom door open a slight crack. "Hurry," said Strix as soon as she was down the hall. "We don't have much time." Lucas had to fight back the growing weakness in his body, but he eventually pulled himself out of bed. "I don't think I can," he told Strix. "I'm not feeling so good." "Please, Lucas, do as we say." He took out a garbage bag he had tucked under the mattress and held the opening to his mouth. Strix told him to hurry up. He inserted his forefinger into his mouth, far enough to tickle his tonsils. After a few moments, he felt the coming eruption in his stomach. Then the pills, along with his dinner of liver and beans, pumped into the garbage bag. He muffled the sounds as best he could in order not to call his mother's attention. After he finished, he fell back on the bed to catch his breath. Although his insides ached from vomiting, his body already felt a strange and growing vigor. It was as though he had expelled something strange, something cancerous, with an aim of eating his organs. "Feel better?" Strix asked him. "I guess I do," Lucas said, feeling strength and control coming back to his arms and legs. He sat up and took in a satisfying breath. "Now get your shoes on," said Strix. "We're going for a run." At the same time, just up the hill, Callista looked out to the Bastion from her floor-to-ceiling bedroom window. Branches of lightning from a thunderstorm ripped into lightning rods on top of the wall. Amidst the flashing, she saw the red dome perched on the top. Strix's voice carried across the bedroom. The owl said, "It's beautiful, isn't it, Callista?" "I never get tired of looking at the Bastion." "Your mother loved it too," said Strix. "Some mornings, she would hold you on her lap and watch the sun rise over the wall." "How do you know that, Strix? You weren't even built yet." "We've been here a long time," said Strix. "Long before we had a physical form." "If you know so much, tell me what happened the night my mom left. I know she had storm madness, but did she really die out there?" "We're afraid she was killed in the storm. However, she was not afflicted with storm madness, or anything else." Before Callista could respond, her father's head was poking through the half-open door. He was still in a suit and tie. In fact, it looked as though he'd been in the same outfit for days. With purple bags under his eyes, the man looked as though he hadn't eaten and perhaps dropped 10 pounds. "Sorry to interrupt," he told her, taking a seat at the foot of the bed. "I just wanted to look at my daughter for a few minutes. I've missed you." "If you miss me so much, why are you acting so strangely and hiding out in your office?" Her father started to talk, but the first syllable caught in his throat. Listen, honey, I'm so sorry." "Don't be sorry. Tell me what's going on. Tell me what those things are in the attic." His face went a shade paler, and he wrinkled up his mouth. Instead of answering, he just sat on the bed looking at her. He appeared as though the weight of the Bastion was on his shoulders. "Well, are you going to answer me?" she asked. "I'm protecting my family," he said, more to himself than to her. "I don't have a choice." Then he abruptly got up and left. After he was gone, Callista asked Strix, "What's wrong with him? Why is he acting like this?" "We cannot answer for your father." "Why not?" "We apologize for changing the subject, but you have a visitor approaching," Strix told her. "Morgan?" "Please be quiet on your way not to alert your father," answered Strix, without another word. When she got to the end of the driveway, she saw Lucas standing there, bathed in streetlight. Strix's red eyes beamed red from the top of his backpack. "It's you," she said. "I wasn't." "Strix told me to come," Lucas said. For a moment, standing under the streetlight, they both just looked at one another. Lucas was flushed and soaked with sweat. His eyes were wide and brimming with moonlight. Then Callista spoke the only thought currently running around in her mind. She said, "You look different every time I see you." Lucas smiled, saying, "I feel different." They walked to the park nearby Callista's house. She was curious and asked about Lucas's illness. He explained he had been sick for as long as he could remember, that his mother had taken him to every doctor they could afford, and he had progressively gotten worse until only recently, until Strix. "Talking to Strix is transforming me or something," he told her. "I can't explain it." He hesitated before telling her. "He also told me to stop taking any food or medication from my mom. He said it isn't good for me." "Why would she give you something that isn't good for you?" "She wouldn't," he answered. "I think it's just a mistake or something. But I do feel better, just like Strix said." "What do you think he is, Strix?" Lucas thought about it. A guardian angel or something, he told her. He's been helping me, that's for sure. They sat down on one of the benches that ran the perimeter of the park. The waves hissed and crashed against the bastion in the distance, sending out a salty kiss of wind. Callista looked at the marvelous black wall, like the nothingness at the event horizon of a black hole. She asked him, "Who do you think really lives up there?" "Someone pretty crazy," said Lucas. "I've always wanted to go to the top, to see the ocean from up there." "Me too," he said. "Although I'm not sure how many have lived through it." Out of nowhere, Strix's electroluminescent feathers turned bright red, then flashed police lights. 2 beams of light from his eyes started to scan the trees around the playground. "Lucas and Callista," Strix said, "please return to the interior of your house immediately." "Why?" she asked. "There is danger present," Strix told them. "We will escort you to safety. Please do not delay." By the time they stood up, it was too late. Nox Jabberosa stood by the sliding board, his big teeth shining as bright as the whites of his eyes. His face was covered in dirt, and his body draped in bloody and rotting skins of rabbits and deer he had killed. "I know the big secret," said Nox. "I finally saw it. I know what your friend the owl doesn't want you to know. I could tell you." "Please do not listen," said Strix. "Nox and his mind have been permanently parted." "Maybe," said Nox, who was smiling like his face was being pulled by invisible forces. "Maybe not." "Just leave us alone," said Lucas. "Go back to living in the woods." "The owl tried to destroy me," said Nox, "but it didn't work. Not all the way. What he did to me, I saw things. Now I see the owl's secrets." "Do not listen," said Strix. "The owl is in my head all the time now," said Nox. "I hear his voice, just like the old man does. It never stops. It never stops. Hey, Callista and Lucas, do you want to know why so many are missing? Where they're going?" The red beams in Strix's eyes scanned their way onto Nox, and he shrank back under the light like a frightened rodent. Then the other Strix, Callista's Strix, did the same. Nox started shivering in his animal skins. "You've gone insane, Nox," the Strixes told him together. "You're going to stop speaking right this second." "You can't hurt me more than you already have," Nox shouted. "Are you sure about that, dear Nox?" asked the Strixes. "Listen," Lucas told Nox. "We don't want to hurt you. Just leave us alone." "Hurt you?" asked Nox. "I don't want to hurt you anymore," he said. "I don't need to." He backed up toward the woods. "I don't need to hurt you, Lucas. I know the truth now." Nox backed up some more until he was on the playground border. "Tell me to run away. Tell Morgan to run away. To run away fast." Nox screamed, "Tell him to stay away from this place, and the 2 of you." Then Nox took off like a frightened rabbit and disappeared into the woods. Thank you. This is Vanadium, and that was chapter 19. And I'll be coming back to you with chapter 20, titled Dark Forces. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.